Welcome to Mint Views. Once again, today we shall discuss the Citizenship Amendment Bill, which was passed by the Lok Sabha yesterday. Not the bill itself, which of course is under furious debate at the moment over whether it is constitutional or not. We want to discuss whether or not the bill can actually complicate India's foreign relations. In the United States, there is a committee. It's called the United States Commission for International Religious Freedom. They have put out a very strong statement calling the bill, the Citizenship Amendment Bill, a dangerous turn in the wrong direction. Now that seems pretty harsh. Could it have consequences? That's the question we are going to discuss today. How valid is this thing? That's another matter. But the big question would be whether or not Indian diplomacy has to basically act and worry about what the United States is saying or taking note of legislation in our country, in our sovereign country, I might add. Shrija, would you fill us in on the details of what's going on in America?
Yeah. So, Arish, the body that you mentioned, it is an independent bipartisan body that was first created in 1998. And the main task is to monitor the human rights standards across the world. And one of the major tasks of this committee is that they can make recommendations to the President, to the Secretary of State, and to the Congress. They also attend, Senate hearings. They can make any adjustments to the congressional research briefs that get produced on human rights violation. They also attend, meetings and conventions with multilateral bodies, including the UN, the OSCE, the European Union. So you can understand that this committee, even if they can't impose sanctions, which is not under their legal jurisdiction, but they can make recommendations. That kind of makes India's case a bit testy, I would say.
Mm-hmm. So they can actually recommend to the government of the United States that sanctions need to be imposed in response to laws like this being passed in India. Does that affect us?
I think our leadership cannot be worried about say the threat of sanctions over certain internal policy decisions. And at the same time, the commission shouldn't be bothered about our internal policy decisions and take calls on whether or not we are right in doing it.
This is not something we should worry about on the foreign policy front. Anand, what do you say?
Yeah, I think I tend to agree with him. As long as we are doing things constitutionally, our democratic principles are being upheld. Other countries are nobody to interfere in our affairs. So we should not be too bothered about what the Americans are saying or some small organization who claims to be a vigilante on human rights is stating about our record. I think they need to look at the American record first. What is the situation of Mexicans over there, blacks over there, before pointing fingers at us or trying to claim a holier than thou status. But I think there is one thing that we need to be cautious about is that individually such incidents may not add up to much as far as foreign relations are concerned. But when you see a spate of events, for instance, the Article 370 removal, and then again, another move that is catching the attention of people abroad or policymakers abroad. And collectively, these might have some impact in terms of the perspective or the perception that they have of the polity in India and the direction that it is taking. So, to that extent, I think our diplomatic efforts need to be vigilant about these kinds of turns and take preemptive steps so that some adverse reaction does not take place.
Mm-hmm. As it turns out, the other bill that they might possibly, the other policy, shall we say, they might look at would be the National Register of Citizenship, which, when taken in conjunction with the Citizenship Amendment Bill, seems to place the burden of proof of citizenship on members of a particular community. And that, I think, is being looked at globally with some degree of suspicion, shall we say. And that could definitely bring greater scrutiny of Indian policies on the whole. Like you said, Anant, the gestalt of it, the sort of sum of parts, rather than the sum of parts. The overall image of India needs to be defended perhaps at this juncture. Shrija, would you agree with that? Do you think we need to worry at all in some sense?
Right, because even when the commission released a press note, they sort of mentioned that the phenomenon is a dangerous turn of events, as you've mentioned, Arish, in your introduction, and also they have said that this sort of bifurcation of the communities in terms of religious lines, that's the term they have used, the religious lines, with an added emphasis. So that tells you that they are deeply concerned that the entire aspect of citizenship is being determined on the grounds of religion, which stands, contrary to our Article 14 and 15 of the Constitution.
May I just counter that? You see, the point whether the CAB is constitutional or not is to be decided by our courts. So America taking objection to it or some organization taking objection to it should not really deter policymakers in India from going forward with the agenda. Because if we start thinking about what others are thinking about our actions, then my fear is that nothing in India would ever get done.
But the issue here is that this is actually international as an issue, because the Citizenship Amendment Bill talks about non-citizens of India being granted or not being granted citizenship of India, and what the criteria for that is, religion in this case. That makes it an international issue already, doesn't it? That could possibly invite the rest of the world to examine Indian policy.
If you recall that even the Donald Trump government had tried to give visas on the basis of religion, and they had brought in a policy where visas to a certain group of Muslim countries were being denied, or they were included in a list that these countries would not get visas to America, and the exclusion was based on religion, or the identified countries profess to the Muslim religion. So that the Americans themselves are doing it. And who are they to cry horse then?
Well, as it turns out, I think a high court, or was it some court, I think in Hawaii, one of the courts in America actually struck that down. It just said that this is unconstitutional, cannot hold. And that was the end of that policy. So it had no impact on the ground. Well, either way, I think India would now need to think about how the collection of Indian policies, particularly to do with things which have any element of religion in it, inflected by religion, policies like that, how it's playing out on the global stage. This is something India should keep watch of, and Indian diplomacy in times to come may have a bigger and bigger challenge on its hands. Thank you.